Hello, everyone. Hope you're having a great day wherever you are in the world. Today, we're here for another inspiring session for Inspiring Figures. And so, for those who don't know, Inspiring Figures is a monthly column I write on my blog, pauline.com. And it's about the people that you should really know about, and they're just the people I love talking about to other people and who really inspire me to be my best self at work, in my personal life, and just in life in general. So today's guest is someone I've been following on Instagram for a really long time now, and we've been actually trying to organize for a couple of months. So I'm just really excited to finally have this date down and actually have a chance to talk to her. So without further ado, Sravanti, hi, good morning.
Hi, it's so nice to talk to you, Pauline.
It's so lovely to talk to you, and just thank you so much for taking time to talk to me today.
Of course.
I know it's just it's getting really dark now in the UK, but it's like bright and early for you, isn't it?
My day just started, so yeah.
Happy Saturday.
Yeah, exactly.
Yay. Fantastic. So I'm really, really excited to have you on board. So could you just quickly introduce yourself to the people who haven't heard of what you do, and yeah,
Sure.
just start from there.
So my name is Sravanti. I describe myself as a software engineer and photographer at this point. I feel like I kind of have these two sides of me that are both equally important. And my day job, I'm a software engineer at Uber. I work on the transit team, working to make public transit accessible to Uber riders. And then, kind of on the side, what I do is a lot of photography. I picked it up a little bit over a year ago, and we can kind of talk about how I got into it. But now I really love shooting portraiture, a little bit of landscape photography sometimes. And so, yeah, that's why I'm here, just to talk about being creative, being a software engineer, and how those two kind of go together. Yeah.
Always. We were just chatting before this. I just find it really interesting when I meet someone in tech who is very they have their different hobbies that is very different to tech, because nowadays I feel like a lot of us intertwine the two, and sometimes I struggle with this a lot. Sometimes I'm sat here working on technical stuff, and then at work I'm also working on technical stuff, and I just don't give myself a break, my brain a break. I need to do something creative. So this is what I've been trying to do with my blog, and obviously chatting to you. So it's really nice to see it's really refreshing in my opinion to see someone have that separation. So I actually wanted to I ask this to everyone who's from a tech background. I just wanted to ask, how did you get to Uber, and how did you get into software engineering? It's always a very fascinating story.
Oh, absolutely. I guess I should start way back to before I was in college. I studied piano performance, and I thought I was going to do piano performance. Tried to go down that way a little bit. And I realized that maybe being a musician was not the most sustainable career choice. And so I came into college. I thought I was going to study biology and music. I did one dissection, and I was like, never again. I cannot go any further. I remember being in a math class, and one of my classmates was like, oh, you should try a computer science class. Legitimately, verbatim, what I said was that computer science is for nerds. And I was like, I'm not going to do that. That's not who I am. And somehow, I ended up in one of these intro classes, and I fell in love with it instantly. I mean, it's about solving problems. It's about really getting to apply what is now kind of becoming universal. Software engineering is kind of eating its way into every single field. And it's so nice to be in a place where I can apply software engineering to anything that I find interesting, right? And so I kind of found my way applying software engineering to education, to ad tech, which wasn't quite as interesting, finance, which also wasn't quite as interesting. And I finally worked my way into Uber, and it kind of happened. I didn't plan for it. I interviewed at a bunch of companies. I didn't expect to end up at Uber. But I was really taken aback by just how impactful my work at Uber could be. I used to work on the safety team, and when I did, it was one of those things where it's everyone has to take an Uber, so people might as well be as safe as possible. And as I started working at Uber, I got really interested in cities, and so that's how I ended up on the transit team. So yeah, it's kind of unexpected, but I think what I try to keep in mind is that I really want to have an open mind, right? And you know, kind of walk into computer science with an open mind, walked into Uber with an open mind, and I think that it served me pretty well up to this date.
That's fantastic. So, like, what do you do in your like day to day in that team?
I'm a full stack software engineer. I write a lot of Go and then some React, which is really fun. I came in as a front end engineer, and now I'm really like doing back end and front end, which is a lot of fun. Yeah, I think it's really important to kind of stretch yourself, learn new things, and so it's been great. I work on specifically on how to bring Uber to paratransit riders, so riders with disabilities, and how do we create products that are accessible to everyone, because public transit, it's not like Uber where it's like you can afford to just be like accessible to a segment of the population. Like for transit, you need to be accessible to everyone, including people who don't have smartphones, people who don't know how Uber works, and kind of creating products that are a lot more accessible, like just doing like telling your Uber is here not through an app but through text and stuff like that. Yeah. It's been a really eye-opening experience. It made me appreciate how many different people there are that like, you know, use transit and get around the world. So yeah,
you know, just listening to you and seeing like your enthusiasm for it, it's so refreshing, because it is really nice. Like I think a lot of us we want to work for a company where we feel like we're making a good impact to anyone, to everyone if possible. And it just sounds like you're really getting that good experience. Yeah, and also like I loved what you said about stretching yourself. You went from front end to like more back end now. I'm in a similar position, so I started like a front end, and I was like front end forever, love it. And then now I'm doing infrastructure.
That's totally
it's just fantastic. It is great to work for a company that really stretches you and says, you know what, I'm going to throw you in the deep end for a bit, see how you feel, and then give you that opportunity. So that's fantastic.
Cool.
Yeah, fantastic. So I wanted to like move away from tech for a second.
Sure.
Can you tell me about like how you became a photographer?
Sure.
Is this something you've always wanted to do, or how did that come about?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I did not always know I wanted to be a photographer, but I feel like I've been training my eye to be a good photographer for a long time. I think, you know, I was on Instagram in the very, very early days, and I think, you know, I just really loved the idea of like posting photos and having them be seen by other people. And so like I would take like photos of things that were interesting to me, like lighting situations that I found interesting, or I see these shadows and stuff like that. But I never really thought of myself as a photographer. This was way back when I was like, you know, maybe a senior in high school, first year in college. And then I never picked up photography because the cameras were really expensive. Like getting a nice camera is definitely an investment, and it wasn't something that I had the ability to do at the time. But after I worked in tech for a little bit, it's like, okay, I saved up a little bit of money. I think it might be time. And really what started that was I loved baking like maybe a couple years ago, and I started getting into baking and posting that baking on Instagram. And I was like, these photos are okay, but they could be a lot better. And so I was like, I'm going to get a camera. I'm going to do the whole thing. And I had like a short stint where like I was food styling and having all of this like lighting and background.
Oh, wow.
It was really cool. And, you know, I was like, maybe I'm going to be a food blogger. And you know what I realized is that baking is a lot of work, takes a lot of time, and like it's also, I ended up eating a lot of what I baked. I was like, this is also not very healthy. I was like, this isn't good. But I was like, you know, I really love photography, and I was like, maybe I should try portraits, because I had went home for like the Christmas holidays. I took portraits of my sister and my dog, and I was like, okay, maybe I should just try this a little bit more. And so honestly, I just started in 2019 taking portraits of people, and what I really, really love is the ability to create a connection with someone. I think that that's something that it's for me, like the photo and the editing and the color and all of that, it's super fun, and that's what I love a lot. But like, I think the thing that really makes a difference is getting to connect with someone, seeing what their vision is. I've been super fortunate to like, I started the year working with friends, and now I work with people who are, you know, maybe like signed models who are looking to practice, and like really working with very talented people. And it's taught me so much about like, you know, how do you kind of stretch your creative boundaries, and how do you think about a creative concept. Like it's not just my photography used to be a lot of let's just go into a park and take photos, and now it's a lot more like, okay, here are the colors that I'm thinking, here's the lighting that I want, and like coming up with like a feeling or an emotion that I want to convey. And that's been like a really fun journey to go on. Yeah.
Oh, I am so inspired. Can you take my picture? Because
So I'm going to come to Leeds and get a picture. It's going to be great. No, I would love to. I'd be so honored.
Honestly, if I'm ever your side of the world, I'd be like, I need my photos. We'll go work together and do something. Yeah. That is great. Like, I think doing something like so creative is so inspiring. You get to like play around with and experiment. Like you said, feeling in your work, and it's fantastic. I definitely feel it when I look at your Instagram feed. I love the different moods. I love the different colors. It is fantastic work. So like in terms of like your equipment, what is your go-to? I always love asking this because I actually started, so I sort of wanted to be a photographer as well. So I bought myself a mirrorless camera like 4 years ago. Yeah, 4 years ago, and it was on sale, and I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna go for it. And honestly, I was like, I'm going to learn all the settings because it's really confusing to like a complete beginner. So I was like, I'm gonna learn all the settings and just go from there. But I started just using it as like a point and shoot, and then my iPhone has just become my main camera now. So then I was just like, you know what, like I'm not creating these fantastic photos like real photographers are. So I was like, you know what, I'm just going to leave that to one side. But one of the main things for me is like whenever I used to go traveling, my camera would just be too big. It wasn't very practical. But I am just like curious, like what sort of equipment do you use when you go like out and about, and just that really.
Totally. Yeah, of course. So I totally understand cameras being too big. I think I'm starting to run into that myself where I'm like, do I really need something that's this big? But what I do use day to day is I use a Canon 80D, and it's a crop sensor camera. But it takes really good photos and video, and I wanted something to be flexible because I was going to stick with photography, if I wanted to go into videography. I had no idea which way my photography was going to go, so I picked a really well-rounded camera. And I picked Canon because I really loved the colors for food photography. Like the color science in Canon is really beautiful. And so I was like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. And then for my lens, I wanted something that was really practical, like something that could work for travel and landscape, but like could be used as a portrait lens. It's really funny that actually has now become my go-to portrait lens as well. I use a 35 millimeter lens, and it's really interesting because like the 35 millimeter focal length, it gives me something that's really realistic and something that is like not really distorted. And I think it's not perhaps as flattering as like a traditional portrait lens, but I think it's worked out really well to almost create like a really realistic sense in my photos, and I loved it. But I have a couple other lenses that I use, a little bit more like a longer focal length for portraits. I have a film camera. That's in my new experiment, and I really love it. Just to kind of go, like, again, really stretching myself. And, I take all the lessons I learned from computer science and software engineering, and I apply it to my photography. And I'm like, okay, what is something I don't know how to do, and how do I learn that? And that's been great. Like, film photography, I can't rely on all the settings of my camera. Like a film camera doesn't tell you whether your photo is going to be overexposed or underexposed. And it's really like, you have to know the settings and you have to trust yourself. And I think it's been really interesting. I just got my first roll of film back, and it was great. There were like 5 or 6 photos that I loved, and everything else was so bad. And I was like, this is
really
great.
I love your patience.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But it's a lot of patience, yeah. And I think so. That's kind of what I'm experimenting with on the side. But that's my the Canon is my day to day. Yeah.
Amazing. So like, when you first got your Canon and you start getting into cameras and photography in general, this is just an add-on question, but how did you like learn? Was it literally just trial and error, or did you go through a course?
I I learned really well with structure. I looked up a bunch of videos on YouTube, and I was amazed at like the number of YouTube tutorials there were, and it was really interesting because the basics of photography are very like it's technical, but I think if you're coming from a computer science background, it makes totally a perfect sense, and it's actually really easy to grasp onto. There's only like 3 variables, and you just have to learn like aperture, shutter speed, and ISO, and after that it's off to the races. But YouTube has been my biggest teacher. I think it's amazing. Like, you have all these people who are really great photographers, and they take you behind the scenes. They're like, this is how I shoot this is what I'm thinking about, this is how I edit. And like, I can't imagine not learning in that setting. Like, I'm just having that kind of unrestricted access to how these people think, because like that's what allowed me to accelerate really, really quickly, is just like by learning from other people. So
honestly, YouTube courses online are fantastic. You've actually reminded me. I recently watched The Witcher on Netflix. Have you seen it?
I haven't. But I've heard of it.
It's fantastic. Anyways, the like film work behind that is incredible, and they've started like posting all of these videos on how they did it, because lots of scenes are very gory, and some of them were taken in one shot. So I was like, learn how they've made how they've done that, and like going back and just going behind the scenes and seeing how the directors and everything were like thinking was just. It was fantastic. YouTube is great.
Yeah, YouTube is fantastic.
Amazing. So, I'm also like quite curious about like your post-production work. Do you edit a lot of your photos? And, like, how do you do it?
I edit a lot. I think for me, especially in the digital photography age, editing is at least half the work of a photo, if not more. For me, it's like you take the pose and take the photo in camera. You can do all you can to make sure the settings are fine, but that's like really just half the work. And I think I spend a lot of time trying to think about what the colors look like, how I can manipulate the lighting a little bit. Some people call it cheating, but I think it's really just taking advantage of the tools that are available to you.
Oh, definitely.
You think about the first film photographers, and in the darkroom, they would actually like dodge and burn and manipulate the lighting in the darkroom themselves. And so something that's been going on for ages, and I think it's super important. But yeah, no, I love playing with the lighting. I love trying to create on like kind of focal points for lighting and being able to edit the colors. I think the colors are the most important part. So a lot of photographers, what they'll do is to make money, they'll sell presets, which is essentially a So it's like a more nuanced Instagram filter, but I really love kind of creating my own presets, thinking, okay, what is something that maybe 2-3 years down the line, I have like a set of presets that someone will look at that and be like, oh, I know that's Sravanti's photo. Like, that's kind of where I want to be. It's like, how do you have that kind of creative vision about the color science that you decide to go with?
Honestly, I can totally see that happening, and I know I'll be like buying them, buying this presets. I mean, like, I've seen a lot of Instagrammers sell their presets, and they're great, and I guess it is a great way to like sell like sort of your like brand, I guess, and your identity a bit. It is really, really good. So onto that, who are your like main inspirations in this field?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that my biggest inspirations are the people I learn from on YouTube. Like Jessica Lacey is a great photographer. She's on YouTube. She's a person whose tutorials I watched in the beginning. I watched all of her behind the scenes. She's inspiring to me because I grew up in Ohio, which is like in the Midwest of the United States, and she grew up in Michigan, and kind of coming from there and really making her way to do fashion photography in LA is like a huge journey. And I love that she's humble, and I love that she's able to be super creative with her work. Like, I remember one time she posted this Instagram photo, and it was a totally different look than like what she had done in the past. And she's like, I don't want to be tied to what I used to be like 2 or 3 years ago. And I thought that was super inspiring. I mean, it sounds cliche, but Annie Leibovitz is like maybe the biggest inspiration for me. I read her book On Work, and it was just is incredible. Like, I think she has such a natural raw talent, and every time you look at like a Vogue cover and you see those photos, they're incredible. Like every single time,
Yeah,
and so she's fantastic. And I think that even I really love like these photographers who are able to be like a photographer for the modern age and for like 2020, like what does a photographer look like Brandon Wolfel is a really good example of someone
yes, I follow him. Yeah.
Good photographer, and he's
Amazing.
able to bring these like very specific colors and create the story. And he's actually one of those people, you look at one of his photos, you know it's him. And
yes, you totally do, definitely.
Yeah. And so like those are the types of people I really look to, and I try my best to kind of have my inspiration come from not just from Instagram. I think that like the moment I'm drawn to just photographers from Instagram, I really feel like I am probably just liking what the algorithm wants me to like, and kind of stepping away from that, looking at Pinterest, reading photography books, like
so important.
Yeah,
so important to step out of that bubble and be like, who am I? What do I want to be? I totally can't agree enough. Are we still there? Oh yeah, okay, awesome.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask then, what is your like main tips for someone interested in starting out in photography?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think my number one tip is to start with the camera that you have. Like, don't feel like you need to go out and buy something immediately. Like, as you said, like iPhones are getting really, really good. And I think it's worth like the most important thing, no matter what camera you have, is to shoot often. Like the number one way I improved was by shooting consistently. So like I shot almost every single weekend for like a year. And so really just like practicing consistency, making sure that you shoot often. And I think like the other thing is that, I mentioned this before, but like YouTube is actually really incredible, and taking the time to learn the manual settings is important. I think the biggest thing in photography that you can learn is that the more control that you have, like the better your photos will be, because it'll be a reflection of what you actually have in your mind. And so you shouldn't have to like give up what your creative vision is to like the autofocus or like the auto settings of the camera. Your camera can take a guess as to what you want, but only you know that, and you can control that a lot better if you know the manual settings. So I know
agree with that enough. Amazing.
But I think like I promise it's really not hard. It looks so much more intimidating than it actually is. And so I would like highly recommend just like take some time, and like you don't have to take pictures of anything crazy while you're practicing. Like my first pictures are this like random like mug that I have at my house, and it was just like me just practicing, okay, what happens if I increase the shutter speed, decrease the shutter speed. And like the last tip I have is to not be afraid to experiment. Like you have to accept that 90% of your photos are going to not look good. They're not going to be what you want, and that's okay. Like you have to be okay to just, because it's just a digital photo. It's not like you're failing anything huge. So not being afraid to click the shutter. Yeah.
Those are amazing like tips. You really inspired me to like pick up my camera again and learn. I think like you said,
your photography. I'm sure it's going. Yeah.
Thank you. I think like when I first picked up my camera and then I was looking at all the settings, I think I was like just super intimidated. So for me, it just became a point and shoot. It just became I just put everything in automatic mode because that's the easiest. But definitely that's really inspired me. So earlier, this is actually my final question. Time has flown, by the way. That's crazy. But I wanted to ask, you were saying that you've taken a lot of portraits of people, and some of them are, like you said, aspiring models or whatever. But have you ever taken photos of people who aren't exactly like ready to get they're not exactly
yeah, of course. That's like 90% of the photos of people I take. And it was
I won't even imagine. I like look at your feed and everyone looks like models.
Oh no, it's only like, honestly, out of my whole feed, I've only done 2 photo shoots with people. Oh no, 1 photo shoot with someone who is a signed model, and everyone else is like they're either practicing or they're just friends of mine. Like I take a lot of photos of friends. I will recruit friends and say, hey, you should do this. And I think it's really hard to, it's it's really hard, I think, for people to see like themselves as like quote unquote models, and they're like, you know, like I don't see myself as a model for like, you know, these photos, but I think it's not as hard as you think at first. And I think that what I've learned as a portrait photographer is that so much, again, is within your control. And so really like learning posing has been huge for me, right? So much of modeling is about posing. And so like learning how to have someone have good posture, and like learning how to like pose their arms and legs so that like things like, I guess, maybe as aesthetically pleasing as possible, I think has been really interesting for me. And like, I think it's been so much fun to see people who are like my friends, people who don't really have a lot of experience in front of the camera, come in, we do a photo shoot, and at the end they're like, wow, I feel so comfortable in front of the camera. That wasn't so bad. And so I think, the vast majority of my photos are not with people who are models at all. It's just like people who they like being in front of the camera, they want to practice that, or they're like friends who are like, you know, I want to try this and I've never done it before. So
that is incredible. It sounds like you really put them at ease. Because I've had people take photos of me, and I mean, like, people often assume that I just love being in front of the camera all the time, and it's just based on everything on Instagram and that I take loads of photos. But it's not actually like that. Whenever I ask someone to take a photo of me, or like I need to get a photo taken for work or whatever, I'm always like shaking. I can't, like, it's actually really tough. I wouldn't say I'm like 100% camera shy, but I would say like I'm not comfortable. I think the only time, even now, like when I ask my partner Matt to take photos of me, I still feel really uncomfortable, and he actually needs to remind me. Like he makes me laugh to make me like relax a little bit. But yeah, it is something that I think I need to learn. I think people just need to sort of relax.
You want a secret? I'm horrible in front of the camera. I absolutely hate having my photo taken. I just detest it so much. I from the camera so often. Yeah, my boyfriend will try to take photos of me, and I literally just like run away. So I think that, like, honestly, me having that experience, it makes me so much more empathetic for when people are in front of the camera, right? Like as soon as you start taking photography, like I always encourage you to have your photos taken, just so that you remember when you ask someone to do something, when you ask someone to pose a certain way, how does that feel? It's not as easy as telling someone, like, when you feel it, it's uncomfortable. Yeah.
Honestly, it really is. I think, have you got any sort of like tips for people, friends you've taken photos of, and what have you, like, the sort of pep talk you've given?
Yeah, I guess the pep talk I give it is that, like, honestly, like, whoever you're having your photo taken by, whether it's me or a friend, like, I always encourage you to like have a conversation with them before, and just like talk to them how their day is going, talk to them about the weather, talk to them about anything, and like think about something that is not having your photo taken. And I think, like, you just kind of ease into it. It's okay. And I think like, I don't know, in terms of like practical tips, I'm like, remember, it's okay to not smile all the time. Like, take a second, reset your muscles, because your face has a lot of muscles. They get very tired. So give them a break. It's okay. And like, I don't know, I think just like remembering to just relax your body, like your body language really does come across in a portrait. And so just, you know, I think that's kind of what I try to tell them. And, you know, I always try to keep like the people that my photography clients at ease. And I always, you know, just if you can make someone laugh, like when you're taking their photo, it'll be okay. Like, it'll
honestly, I had my the last time I had like a proper photographer come in and take photos of me was at work, in the office, in front of everyone, because he wanted to take like shots. I know, like in the workplace. So I was there, and I remember just feeling really stiff. But then he took me to one side, and he was like, "I know you feel really uncomfortable, but it'll be okay. Like, we want to get your best self forward in these photos," because it was going into the paper. So they were like, we need to make you look as powerful, because that's what you are, like, when you're like on stage, whenever I'm really comfortable. So yeah, he gave me this really, really positive pep talk, and then I was like in the office but posing like Beyonce, like, and people were like, what?
I love it. That's so fantastic. I'm so happy that was your experience.
That is definitely something. It takes a good photographer to do that. I'm actually getting my photo. I'm planning to get like some new photos done and to do like a bit of a rebrand sort of thing. So it's going to be really good, and I think I'm definitely, I feel really inspired by everything you said. So I'm definitely going to take that on board. And that was actually like my final question. So to wrap things up, where can people find you?
Yeah, of course. So people can find me. I think photography. My Instagram is the number one place. It's Sravantea. I have a photography website, which is just my name.photos. And also on Twitter, I haven't tweeted in a while, but I think I'm going to bring it back and start talking about my process behind the scenes. And so,
honestly, that would be super valuable.
Cool.
Like everything you said would be super valuable. Thank you so much, Sravanti. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Have a lovely day.
Thank you. You too. All right. Bye.